The first thing I heard when I stepped out of the cab was someone shouting my name. The second was the slap of bare feet against a sun-warmed sidewalk. I turned toward the little blue house next door and saw a woman running across the lawn as if 6 months of waiting had finally broken something open inside her. Her hair flew behind her, her face was wet with tears, and before I could drop my sea bag, Rachel Bennett threw both arms around me. I stood frozen in my driveway in Charleston, South Carolina, smelling salt on my own clothes and summer flowers in the air, while my neighbor held me like a man she had once believed might never come home. And in that moment, I realized the hardest part of my journey had never happened at sea. It had happened right here, while I was gone. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can rebuild a life, hope can survive distance, forgiveness can heal old wounds, and people deserve second chances, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs an uplifting story, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories of compassion and faith reach hearts that may need them more than we know. My name is Nathan Carter, and for 14 years, the ocean had been easier for me than home. I worked as a marine engineer on commercial vessels, spending months away from the South Carolina coast. People assumed I loved adventure. The truth was less impressive. I loved leaving. 3 years earlier, my wife Claire had passed away after a sudden illness, and our quiet house became a museum of unfinished mornings. Her coffee mug remained in the cabinet. Her gardening gloves stayed on a shelf in the garage. For months, I couldn't even move the blue sweater she had left over the back of a chair, so I accepted longer contracts. I told my brother Matthew that the money was good. I told my coworkers I preferred the sea, but somewhere deep inside, I knew I was hiding from rooms that remembered too much. Rachel moved next door about 8 months before my latest assignment. She was 37, worked at a small community library, and had an irritating habit of noticing things I wanted everyone else to ignore. She noticed when my porch light burned out and quietly left a new bulb beside my door. She noticed that I ate frozen dinners and sometimes brought over extra soup, pretending she had made too much. When I tried to refuse, she simply smiled and walked away. Rachel never asked me to explain my grief. That was what made her kindness so difficult to resist. She didn't try to repair me. She just made the silence around me feel less empty. 2 days before I left for 6 months at sea, a storm damaged part of my backyard fence. Rachel found me outside fighting with a crooked wooden panel in the rain. She came over holding an umbrella, and somehow we ended up sitting on my porch until nearly midnight. I told her about Claire for the first time. I told her how guilty I felt whenever I laughed, how happiness seemed like betrayal. Rachel listened without interrupting, then quietly said that loving someone who was gone didn't require me to disappear with them. I carried those words onto the ship. The months at sea were harder than usual, not because of the work, but because home had finally given me something to miss. Rachel sent occasional emails about ordinary things. The hydrangeas were blooming. Matthew had stopped by. A stray orange cat had claimed my porch as its kingdom. She never wrote that she missed me, and I never admitted how many times I reread her messages during lonely night shifts. Then, 3 weeks before my return, the emails stopped. I convinced myself she was busy. After another week, I wondered if I had imagined the closeness between us. By the time the ship reached port, I had prepared myself to see a moving truck outside her house or another man's car in her driveway. That was why her barefoot sprint across the lawn stunned me. When Rachel finally stepped back from our embrace, she looked embarrassed. Then I noticed the exhaustion beneath her smile. Over coffee that afternoon, I learned the truth. Her father, Thomas, had suffered a health scare in Tennessee. Rachel had spent weeks traveling back and forth, helping her parents arrange care and manage their home. She had stopped writing because every message she drafted felt too heavy. She didn't want my last weeks at sea filled with worry. But there was something else. While I was gone, Rachel had looked after my house. One afternoon, a pipe beneath the kitchen sink had leaked. Matthew gave her a spare key so she could let the plumber inside. While cleaning up the water, she saw Claire's old blue sweater still hanging over the chair. Rachel hadn't touched it, she simply understood. Nathan Carter had never truly come home, because part of him was still waiting for permission to keep living. I expected Rachel to ask me what I wanted from her. Instead, she told me she had nearly accepted a job in Nashville to be closer to her parents. The offer was still open. Suddenly, 6 months on the ocean felt shorter than the 10 seconds it took me to understand I could lose her. For years, fear had made my decision sound practical. Longer contracts, quiet dinners, empty weekends. I had called it independence when it was really avoidance. So I walked into my living room, picked up Claire's blue sweater, and held it against my chest one final time. I cried without shame. Then I carefully folded it and placed it in a cedar box with our photographs and letters. I wasn't erasing my marriage. I was finally honoring it without turning my grief into a prison. The next morning, I found Rachel watering flowers between our houses. This time, I was the one who crossed the lawn. I told her I couldn't promise a perfect heart. I couldn't promise I would never have difficult days. But I could promise to stop running away every time life gave me something precious enough to lose. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She took my hand, and for once, neither of us needed to hide behind an excuse. Nathan didn't quit the sea immediately. Real change rarely happens that neatly. He accepted shorter assignments and eventually took a shore-based engineering position in Charleston. Rachel helped her parents relocate closer to South Carolina, where Thomas recovered well and discovered an enthusiastic love for fishing from the local pier. The orange cat officially became Nathan's, although Rachel insisted the cat had made that decision months earlier. A year after that Barefoot reunion, Nathan and Rachel stood in the backyard beside the fence where their first honest conversation had begun. There was no grand crowd and no perfect cinematic speech. Nathan simply asked Rachel if she would build an ordinary life with him, one filled with grocery lists, difficult mornings, laughter, faith, memories, and whatever years God allowed them to share. Rachel said yes through tears. If Nathan and Rachel's journey touched your heart, please show this story some love. Share it with someone who has been afraid to begin again. And subscribe if you want more stories about compassion, healing, and the quiet courage it takes to choose hope. And before this story ends, I have one special request. Leave a comment and tell us this. Do you believe opening your heart again can honor the love you lost instead of replacing it? Your words may reach someone who is sitting alone today, wondering whether they are allowed to feel joy again. Nathan kept Claire's cedar box for the rest of his life. Rachel never asked him to put it away. On their wedding morning, she placed a small white flower on top of it and quietly left the room. Nathan stood there for a long moment, tears in his eyes, understanding something the ocean had never been able to teach him. Some people enter our lives to love us for a lifetime. Others arrive to remind us that life is still waiting, and sometimes, after months of distance and years of grief, hope doesn't knock politely at the door. Sometimes it runs barefoot across the lawn and falls straight into your arms.